Welcome to the Animation Industry Podcast. My name is Terry, and I'm doing this intro really quickly because my dog wants to go for a walk. This episode features Ted Mathot, who, more than 20 years ago, got his big break storyboarding on The Simpsons. After that, he ended up at Pixar, where he worked for over 20 years as a story artist and supervisor, working on some of the biggest Pixar films with Brad Bird, like The Incredibles and Ratatouille. Now he's the creative director at Spire Studios, and in our chat, he's going to share everything he's learned working on some of the most incredible stories of our generation, including what Pixar did to make their stories stand out and connect with audiences around the world, and what new story artists must focus on to really make their work come alive. So now, without further ado, let's jump in. Hi, Ted. How is it going on your end?
It's going very well, all things considering.
What do you like? What considering what? What's something you're considering right now?
Well, we're trying to come out of a long pandemic. All of our communication most of our communication is over the computer screen, and
I feel that a lot. Same here.
I'm doing okay.
Yeah. I'm like, now that the weather's like nice and like things are opening up in Toronto, I'm finally getting to like see some of my friends. It's been fantastic, but enough pandemic talk, because I'm also like so sick of pandemic. Let's chat about your life, the life and times of Ted. So can you just tell me what you do? First of all, just start off. What are you doing these days in the industry?
Sure. So I just started with Spire Studios. I'm very fresh to this company, so I've been there for just over 3 weeks now.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, just making movies, man, and I'm focused.
This is a big career change for you though, right?
Yes and no. It's a big change in that going from a large studio like Pixar to a very small studio like Spire is a change. But one of the reasons I went there are people that I know there, very comfortable with there. Brad Lewis, who is the co-founder, he and I go back to Ratatouille days. And Sean Krause, who you've talked to before on the podcast.
Yes.
We go way back 20 years.
So you so you said it's not a huge career change, but in my mind, you've been at Pixar for over 2 decades, and now you've been at a new company for 3 weeks. Isn't that a little scary and like starting something fresh like this after being in a company for so long? Or did you feel like ready for a change, like a move up? Like, what was the underlying, you said you're working with some amazing people, but what was the underlying reason? Like, they approach you at Pixar and you're like, well, I've been at Pixar forever, I'm loyal to Pixar, I've worked on amazing movies. Like, what is that underlying motivation that got you to go from like the biggest storytelling movie place in the world to this new studio?
Yeah, just new challenges. I'm always looking to challenge myself, always wanting to learn, to push myself. So I actually left Pixar and I started developing my own ideas. And it was during that period that Sean reached out to me about Spire, and they had a great idea for a movie, and it just hooked me. So I actually did freelance with those guys for a couple months.
So when you say working on your own ideas, are you talking about your own like movie pitches?
Yeah.
Oh wow. So you're working at Pixar and you're like, I wanna be the story director, writer, script, or like what is that? What was that thing you wanted to be that like you weren't getting at Pixar?
It's not necessarily not getting. It's more of just a personal challenge.
Yeah.
Because as you know, as a creative person, you have these ideas that are simmering and they're kind of always with you, and you're carrying them around. And
oh yeah,
you get to that point where it's like, I want to execute this vision, I want to get this idea out there and visualize it. So I had done comics in the past, and it was one of the most rewarding things that I've ever done creatively. So this is just an extension of that. It's just different medium of film.
So, but what made you say like, I'm working at Pixar during the day and I can execute my visions for this film idea at night? Like, instead of, like one option is to quit as you did and work on this yourself full time on the side. Another option is to like keep working and do it as like a side hustle. Like why? I'm just trying to understand like why did you quit and then decide to pursue this path, which obviously has worked out very nicely for you.
Mhm. It's just, I don't know. It's timing, man. I can't say one thing or the other thing. It's just, you know, you get to a point like where I am in my career, you know, 25, 26 years in, you know, and I'm like, I think I want to take on this challenge, you know, and, you know, it's hard to leave a company after so many years and you've made great friends there and you've worked on amazing projects. And, you know, it happened to me when I left LA. I was working at DreamWorks and I came up to the Bay Area to San Francisco and I knew one person, you know. I believe in big moves, you know.
Yeah. No, I love this. I like, I find it fascinating to take such a big risk as yourself, because so many, like for instance, like Pixar is on, like everybody knows about it, everybody wants to work there, etc. And to like leave a place like that after working on like amazing movies over the years to pursue something that you find challenging personally, I think that's amazing. So you just hinted a little bit at kind of your origin stories. Do you want to dial it back and share where this journey started for you in the first place?
Sure. I graduated Rhode Island School of Design, and I had a split major in film and animation and illustration. So animation was a great medium for me, you know, because I had the film and I had the drawing. You know, when I first applied to RISD, it was as an architect, you know, and I grew up loving animation. So eventually, you know, steered towards that and got into TV pretty much right out of school. And it was working on The Simpsons that things really started to click for me.
So you got on The Simpsons right out of school? Like,
I had done a couple TV jobs prior to that, but it was on The Simpsons where, you know, I met the people who were going to be fundamental in helping me along the way in my career.
wow. Were you boarding? You were boarding on The Simpsons?
I started in character layout.
Uh-huh.
And then I got into boarding slowly. And it was David Silverman, who was the creative director at the time, who gave me my shot at that. And David and I have a long history. He's helped me out immensely, as well as Brad Bird, who we knew each other only through the work.
Yeah.
So we would do our storyboards and then they would package them up and they would send them off to Brad, and he'd sit in the coffee shop and he'd do his notes right on the boards, and then he'd send them back and they would call out, Brad, notes are here, Brad, you know, and everyone would come running, right? You'd open the thing. It was like Christmas morning for me, and like you get your notes and you bring them back to your desk and just like devour all the goodness and all the learning. So
it sounds like that energy. Like my first thought would be like, oh gosh, he probably tore apart my stuff.
yeah, well, you know, I mean, luckily for me, you know, I did very well, and
Nice.
he liked my stuff quite a bit.
But like this was pretty early on in your career. What was like, you know, what was driving you to do really well and to like push yourself and make these connections and like give a good impression to these people?
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, you want to succeed, right? So you just want to put the best work you possibly can, you know, like that's just my nature, you know, and I think it's a lot of people's nature when they get into work that they love. You know, I just want to excel and I want to learn and I want to learn and learn and learn and get better and better, you know. It's just inherent in who I am.
And you still feel that way after 25 years in the industry?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Yeah.
No, I love this.
I'm
That's
not
great.
slowing down, man. I mean, you have to keep pushing yourself.
Were there ever a time where you know, things were going the opposite for you and you really felt, you know, like the opposite of I really love this and I'm pushing myself, where things were in a rut?
Never
Once. Wow. I feel like that's so rare.
If you're feeling like you're flagging, you
Yeah.
know, stay in your daily job, like that's where I would turn to side projects, you know.
Yeah.
I mentioned I did comics, so I was doing full-on graphic novels, you know, at night while I was, you know, working during the day, and it keeps the creativity going, you know.
With those side projects, like your graphic novels, did you publish them, or was it like just purely a personal side project thing to energize you?
I self-published them here in the US. So my friend Derek Thompson and I, who also does comics, were tabling at like Comic-Con and Ape and Emerald City up in Seattle. And so we were going up and down the West Coast, like tabling and selling our stuff. And it was at Comic-Con that a couple of French guys came by. I was away from the table and I come back and Derek says, hey, there were some French guys here and they wanted to talk to you. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting and really unexpected. They were two publishers who wanted to publish the comic over in France.
So it got published in France.
It did, yeah.
Nice.
And
congratulations, that's so random.
thanks. Yeah, it was totally unexpected, you know, and whenever I, you know, talk or do classes or teach or whatever, I tell people like, do something that's purely yours and get it out there in the world, whatever it is.
Oh, that's good advice. I like that a lot. So maybe let's talk about, you know, you were on Simpsons boarding on a TV show and then you moved to, you know, Pixar, which is CG feature. How rare or common is it for, because I've heard of, like, I'm not a storyboard artist myself, but I've heard there's a big difference between TV boarding and feature boarding, and it's like tough to move between the two. Was that true for you? Like, did you actively try to get to Pixar?
No, it was kind of a natural progression. Again, you know, it goes back to David Silverman, who had left Simpsons to go to DreamWorks, where he was directing The Road to El Dorado. You know, so I sort of followed him over there, and then he left DreamWorks and he went to Pixar, where he was working on Monsters Inc. And then I went up there, you know, so I was sort of like trailing David throughout these studios and these productions.
Is that like typical for a director to like bring their people in a sense with them?
I think so. You know, Brad Bird did it when he came up to Pixar to do The Incredibles. He brought a whole cadre of artists, you know, that he was working with on Iron Giant.
Yeah, nice. So you're at Pixar. Can you give me some highlights from, you know, Pixar for 21 years? You worked your way up to story supervisor. Like, I guess maybe give me some highlights, but also I'm wondering, you know, what was the thing that pushed you? You kind of touched on it already, to become what was the one thing that made you a story supervisor instead of just, you know, keeping on doing story? Like, what helped you progress in that area as well?
Yeah, again, it's the challenge, you know, it's if you look for those areas where it's like, okay, I want to learn about this, or I want to improve on this. And I was teaching and mentoring the Pixar story internship during the summers.
Oh, nice.
You know, so we were going and we were scouting schools and meeting artists and stuff. And then, you know, we had a whole program set up. And I'm like, wow, this is really interesting, you know, and it sort of made me want to try getting into leadership, you know, and being that conduit between the director and a team, because I love teams. I love working with people. So, you know, that's a challenge. It's like, okay, I have to learn how to lead a team and to help the director get their vision onto the screen through artists, a group of artists.
Nice. So what is a skill set that a story supervisor needs that a storyboard or a story artist doesn't have? Because I'm thinking, like, you know, you're a story artist, you're like amazing at your craft, you're super good at like cinematography, clarity, you know, putting the script into story, getting it approved, et cetera. Like, what is the thing that helps you jump from being a super phenomenal story artist to like a story supervisor, if that's your path? Like, obviously you said, you know, you took some leadership roles. That's something you wanted to do, working in a team. But what was, I guess, the skill set other than, you know, leadership, which is a skill set, that helped you jump?
Yeah, and one of the big things is communication. You know, especially communication in a non-visual way. You know, where you have to communicate. I mean, you do it through drawings, but also passing the director's vision along to the team and guiding them and instructing them on, you know, how to get what the director is looking for into storyboards, which is just a sort of a subset of leadership, you know. So I read a ton of books on how to do that, you know.
Is there one you can recommend that you can think of?
Oh boy.
Putting you on the spot a bit.
There was a bunch. Well, this, I mean, it's kind of personal. So there's one called Quiet,
Okay.
but it was about how introverts lead,
Hmm.
which was really helpful for me because on the first Incredibles movie, Mark Andrews was the head of story, the story supervisor on that movie. And Mark is a very gregarious, he's a big personality. Um, and I'm very different than that. So
Hmm.
when I was souping on Incredibles 2, I'm like, okay, what's my leadership style going to be? Because I'm not Mark, I'm more a quieter person, So this book was really interesting because it compared and contrasted the two different styles, leading, how extroverts lead, how introverts lead. And neither one is any more effective than the other. It's all about how you do it.
Hmm. I think that's really interesting that because I was expecting you to be like the storyboarder's guide to, like whatever book, but you actually took it more from an interpersonal approach and said like what like soft skills would help me excel just
Yeah.
as a leader. That's really cool. I think that's really good. You also mentioned like,
I'll give you another one.
yeah, yeah.
So they had an inspirational, I don't know if he's called an inspirational speaker, but Simon Sinek came to the studio and he wrote a book called Leaders Eat Last, which was completely transformative for me. I know it's, sort of highfalutin to say it was a life changing experience, but it was. Without getting too much into it, if anybody who's interested in leadership, get that book and read it.
Nice.
It's fantastic and very helpful.
Cool. I'll find a link to that and put it in the description of this podcast if you're listening. But I think that's really great. Thanks for sharing those. You also mentioned, part of your role is to get the director's like figure out the director's head and then get that to all the story artists too. So you're not actually boarding yourself. Most of what you do is actually, working between the director and the story artist. Is that true?
I'm definitely boarding. Yeah.
You're definitely boarding as well. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. It's part of my philosophy is, the supervisor should always be boarding,
Huh.
and for me personally, if I'm not drawing, then that's a whole chunk of my, what I love to do removed from the equation. So I want to be drawing and I want to have boots on the ground with everybody else.
Yeah.
That's, it's everybody, it's all out there on the playing field,
Who supervises your drawings then?
Well, a director, I guess.
I guess.
No, but in a sort of abstract way, the rest of the team is,
Yeah.
because everybody should be, you know, at this level, right? So I'm like, oh man, so and so's drawings of Elastigirl are so good. I want to try to get what they're doing or learn from what they're doing. So there's this great sort of osmosis happening within the team.
So everybody's kind of leveling up each other as you work in a team. How do you facilitate that kind of culture as the story supervisor? You said you read some books and things, and I think it's also great that you practice it because I've talked to story supervisors and other people who, when they become that supervisor level, animation supervisor, they stop animating and they're just all their time is spent like reviewing stuff. So I think it's really cool that you've kept that going. But how do you facilitate a culture of bringing everybody up? Obviously, there's a lot of that happening just from the artists themselves.
Yeah, you have to trust people to do their jobs, and you have to challenge them. One of the things and that starts from the top, that starts at the director and producer level. But one of the things you want to do, for me, I want people to leave a show better than when they came on, and you do that by challenging them.
Is there a way, because like in my mind, challenging somebody, there's a fine line between like somebody perceiving it as like criticism versus like a challenge. Is there a way that you figured out how to uplift somebody and bring them to a challenge rather than not that you're doing this, but like Killer Spirit with like, oh, you drew Elastigirl and it sucked. Like not that you're doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it's not criticism. It's for example, when we were working on Incredibles 2,
yeah,
there's a lot of action scenes in that movie, so we were going very fast. We had a shortened schedule, And there are certain cases, because Brad Bird is the writer and the director, he's nailing down the writing. And there was a point when I said, Brad, can we take some of these action scenes off your plate so you can focus on the other scenes that you're writing? And he's like, yeah, man. So there's that trust there. Then I take that and I go to the artist and I say, okay, here's an action scene in the third act. It's not written. This is the objective, and it's all yours.
Cool.
And
that's probably more fun to work on than getting a scene just like from the script, I would almost think.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. I love scripted scenes because it's like, okay, here it is. Now I can do my job with it. I mean, they're both great.
So how much, so in Pixar's way, I guess, or the way that you were doing, how much of the story is actually determined by the story artist / the story supervisor versus the writer director? Because like, you have a script and you get like the notes from Brad, but how much are you actually going, oh, in this action scene, I think it would actually be better if this character came in and did this thing versus what is scripted out? Like, are you changing the story much and adding to it, or just putting it down in clarity?
Depends on the director, really. Working with Bird, since he's the writer and the director, he's seeing the movie already in his head, right? So our job on those films are to take what he's written and I tell the artist to storyboard what's not on the page. In other words, how do we show the subtext visually, things like that? How do we enhance or improve on the written word with visuals? Because if we just storyboard two talking heads talking to each other, then we're not doing the full job. It's a visual medium. So what's the subtext? What's the visual thing that's going to support what's happening in the scene? Like, that's key. Yeah, it's great filmmaking.
Can you think of, so say you have two talking heads, what would some subtext be that would add to that scene? Maybe just, I don't know, think on the fly.
It depends what it's about. We had a scene in Incredibles 2 where, Bob and Helen, Helen gets the job, right, in this movie. It's sort of a role reversal from the first one. And we had a scene, it's not in the movie, but they had Jack Jack, and they were using Jack Jack as a way to sort of pass on the parental duties. Like, here, you take Jack Jack while I engage in this conversation. The subtext is, you're going to be watching the kids. I'm going to go do the job. So we had this thing where the baby was being handed.
Oh, nice. That actually sounds really funny too. Like it's just like a comical scene.
It's that kind of stuff that you're looking for,
So like, there's this script is written, there's a certain formula to the hero's journey and the acts and whatever. Like, what do you do in the boarding stage other than the subtext to really ensure that this is like a really entertaining, visually driven, not formulaic, fresh and exciting, all those adjectives movie for people who watch it? Mm-hmm. Like, you have to, I'm assuming you like study and whatnot, but like, how do you keep it fresh and all that stuff?
Yeah. A word that we use a lot is specificity. It's something we didn't talk about 10, 12 years ago when I was doing this. But a note that I give often is something might feel generic or general, and it needs to be specific. So those things are always going to feel more realistic because they're pulled from your life or from somebody's.
So what do you mean general versus specific?
Like, say, we haven't experienced something in our lives, right? And we go to storyboard it. For me, the tendency is to rely on something you've seen before, or somebody did it a certain way.
So right? You have like a plumber come in and they like go under the sink and it's like that's like a general thing. You're not the plumber.
Like, oh, plumber's crack, haha, isn't that funny? It's like seen it a billion times, Right. But if you've actually had a plumber come over to your house, what were they like? What was their personality? Were they pleasant or were they gruff? Or, it's all those things.
So how do you manufacture specificity in this sense?
It's through experience.
So would you go out and actually like get yourself under a sink to see what it's like, or like hire a plumber in this scenario?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, well, I mean, you wouldn't hire a plumber, but that gets a little too into the method aspect of it.
Right.
But I would, when I was tabling at conventions, people would say, how do you do a comic? Like, how do I make my comics better? And I would say, just get out there and get lost. Like, it's a great storyboarding exercise is to storyboard sometime that you got lost.
So do you like tomorrow you're going to be like, I have an hour. I'm just going to walk aimlessly around town and see what happens?
Well, you want to have a goal.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay, get ice cream and walk around aimlessly and see what happens.
yeah, like on Incredibles 2, like I don't have kids, but the other people, Brad and Mark Andrews, who are helping us with this, where Brad was directing it, but Mark came on to help us, were able to speak about their experiences as fathers, and Nicole Brindle, who was producing as a mother, so they brought a lot to that film through those experiences. Vi getting super embarrassed at the restaurant, by Tony Ridinger, and her dad acting all, making her uncomfortable. I mean, that was drawn from experience.
Nice. That's kind of interesting. So like the story, I guess, even though it's this fantasy made up script, it's actually amalgamation of tons of different people's personal experiences, and that helps bring it to life. I've never really heard somebody put it like that before, but I really enjoy that. Would you say that's kind of like the secret to the success of Pixar
Absolutely.
stories, or just stories in general?
You want to be relatable to your audience. You want people to relate to your film and connect to the story and the characters. So it's tricky because you have universal situations, but you have to make them specific so they don't feel generic.
Yeah, totally. Interesting. Are there any other like story tips that you think are really good for people who are, working in storyboarding right now to work on? Because, you as a story supervisor giving notes all the time, was there something other than specificity that you think people should really focus on?
Yeah, I always look for some of the artist's personality in their work. When we were putting together the story internship, one of the assignments was to storyboard something that happened to you, and this was the last assignment of a 3-month program. And, so you're automatically going to get specific things because this is something that happened to these artists, right? And the goal is for me to feel how they were feeling when it happened, whether it's, you had a summer job installing cable, or you had a sick family member, or you went out on a date and you got food poisoning. Like, these are all stories that were pitched to us, and that's a great exercise.
Nice.
And I love seeing those in portfolios because it gives me a sense of who the person is. And it's also, it's a very specific thing,
It's like a real story that tells you about who that person is. I actually wanted to ask you, like, if I want to get into storyboarding, like, I went to Sheridan and there are storyboarding classes, but I don't know if there are specific, like certificates or whatever you can just get in storyboarding. So like, where's a good place to learn and start? And my mind is like, okay, make up a story or like storyboard something that exists, or like a fairy tale or something. But you're saying maybe a good place to start is actually just storyboarding something that happened to you personally.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Are there other than like that, are there resources that you always recommend that people, study and look to improve?
Yeah, I draw from films because we all will ultimately want to have a library of shots in our heads, that we use to communicate with. So I'm constantly watching movies. When I was souping on Incredibles 2, Brad Bird was referencing films, in our discussions, but he would never say, do it like this movie. He would say, that movie where, so-and-so does this with their hands, like we're going for that kind of a feel. And it was one too many times that he referenced a film that I hadn't seen. I don't want to be embarrassed in front of Brad, right? So I kind of smile and nod, and then I go home that night and I watch that movie.
Yeah.
So I challenged myself to watch 100 films in a calendar year that I had not seen before.
Wow.
Put all those on, that Brad had talked about that I hadn't
Yeah.
seen. So I was doing it. It was really fun. And I proposed it to the team. I said, here's a challenge for you guys if you choose to accept it, and it became this thing. And what people started doing was this is when we were in the office, but they would put paper on the door of their office and they would start writing down the films as they saw them.
Wow.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it turned out to be this great conversation piece, right? So you'd go up to somebody's door and you see the list and you're like, oh, you saw such and such, how was that? And then you have that conversation. Or you see a thing and it's got, some people were rating them. So, it's like, oh, 5 stars. I haven't seen that. Maybe I should check that out. So watching a lot of movies, drawing from them, drawing the shots, drawing how the shots cut together was always a big thing for me, because you're like, oh, I can add that shot and I can add that shot. And now it's all living in your head that you can pull from.
Did you notice when you took on this challenge and at the end of it, did you notice a big difference in how you boarded and what you drew from and your actual skills as a boarder?
Absolutely. Yeah, without question. Yeah, because you're seeing all these different kinds of films, so I would go to other sources too. I'd go to like Edgar Wright, who directed Shaun of the Dead, put out a list of his 1,000 favorite movies. I'm only halfway through it, but
so you hit 500.
Yeah, I've just crossed the 500 mark. A bunch of them I had already seen. Yeah. Maybe about 300 of them,
So you're watching a movie every single night, basically. Like after this, you're going to put on a movie.
Possibly. Yeah.
Possibly.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, I've heard a lot, like, watch movies, but I like that you actually gave yourself a challenge to watch 100 movies and like actively saw yourself improve, because like that also feels like a lot of work as well. Like, pushing yourself to keep watching when you have other stuff to do and whatnot. So
yeah, and it depends on how busy you are. Some people are busier than others, but to me it's like, hey, there's 24 hours in every day. I will find the time. Sometimes I get up super early and I watch a movie in the morning.
Wow. I don't think I've ever I've gotten up for a jog, but I haven't gotten up to watch a movie. I just fall back asleep.
Maybe you jog every other day, and then you slip a movie in there once a week. I don't know, it's
yeah. No, I like this. I'm kind of challenging myself to watch more like anime, actually, because it's something that's not been on my radar at all. And I'm realizing how much, that there is in that I just haven't had exposure to.
Yeah. I just watched Paprika.
Oh, nice.
By Satoshi Kon.
Yeah.
You seen it?
Usually crazy film.
So good. So I'm like, why have I slept on this?
Right?
Yeah, it's kind of kicking myself because I love Perfect Blue.
Yeah.
And then I watched Paprika. Now I want to watch the rest. I mean, unfortunately, he only did, I think, 4 features.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's sad when you find a really good director and they haven't even you run out of their work and you're like, no, keep making stuff. Come back from the dead. Okay. So, you've had a very fruitful career. You've been at Pixar for a while. You were on The Simpsons. You're now at Spire. Like, what is, and also you've talked about how you've really trained in your craft and you're opening your mind with all these movies and everything. Like, what is story like for you that you want to put out into the world that you're challenging yourself with? Like, what is, you were coming up with your own ideas and then Spire came to you and you fell in love with what they're doing. Like, what is that thing that is TED that needs to be in the world that you've learned and you want to create? Is that articulated very well?
Like a specific idea or?
Yeah, just what is your vision for story? You've worked on some of the biggest feature films of our time, and now you're working on something new. Like, what is that? What do you want to infuse as your vision for story now that you're doing things kind of to challenge yourself and,
Yeah. I don't know if it's anything new or groundbreaking. To me, it's always about making somebody feel something. Mm-hmm. I feel like as filmmakers, if somebody doesn't come out of the theater or, at the end of the film, if they're not feeling some kind of emotion, then I haven't done my job or the filmmakers haven't done their job, and it could be, you could be happy or exhilarated or whatever it is. If there's not an emotion there, then I feel like I haven't done my job. So that's always the thing that I'm striving towards, and it's hard to do.
So how do you infuse emotion into somebody after an hour and a half experience or 2 hour experience? Like what is the driving force behind that? Because you can show them things that make them laugh and cry, and they can still come out of the theater and be like, that sucked, right? Like,
well, I don't know. I mean, if you
sucked is an emotion as well.
You could say it sucked because I hate crying, or I don't want people to see, that I'm moist in the eyeball. And that happens, everybody brings part of themselves to the movie or the TV show or whatever it is they're watching. And the percentages vary. Some people say, oh, I think it's 50% that they're bringing it personal to the movie, or it could be as low as 10 or whatever. But it's that other percent, that you have to get them on board with what you're telling and who your characters are and what the story is, and how that character progresses or learns or, does whatever on their journey.
So,
and a lot of,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
A lot of it goes back to what I was saying earlier about relatability, somebody being able to see part of themselves in that character or having empathy for that character.
So your number one goal is to create an emotional response in somebody from this art form. I think that's really cool. Is there a certain story internally that you want to tell that you think would be amazing to share with other people? Like, are you driven to tell a certain type of story in all this?
Not particularly.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be any situation, any time period, any character, what have you. It's just at the end of the day, it's like, I want somebody to feel something. When I did comics, I got an email from someone and they said, hey, I cried at the end. And that's like the highest praise. Not that I made something sad, but that, you created something that elicited that kind of response from somebody, even if it's only one person. To me, that's always the objectives, that to pull somebody into that world that you've created, those characters that you've created, and to make them feel a profound emotion, whatever it is. That's what it's all about for me.
No, I love that. And that's happened to me a couple times, and it just feels like, time stops, and this is what I'm here for, really. And I just, it's like, I don't know, it's a feeling you don't get, that I personally don't get from like a lot of other things that I've done in my life, but storytelling and creating animation through that is something that's really been my thing, I guess. Thinking about,
as a viewer, it's the same on the other side of the screen. When I see a film that I have strong emotion for, it's a great experience to me.
Oh yeah, you feel like you're connected with somebody else behind the camera somehow, and like that guy that felt compelled to reach out to you, like they, so strong in emotion, he was like, I need to get in touch with this creator and just tell him how I feel. That's amazing. I guess looking forward in your career, we've talked about a lot of the past. Are there certain things that you want to accomplish going forward through everything you've learned?
I think it's just to continue to tell good stories.
Yeah.
I would love to get a story of mine out there, to fully realize and visualize something in film, is a goal of mine. But in the meantime, I just love working with people and working with teams and creating these things. I mean, they come out of nothing, ones and zeros, if it's a digital, that's amazing to me.
Nice. I love that. Is there, I guess, is there anything else that you think would be important to share about, what you're doing at Spire now, or just from your journey or anything to somebody listening? Yeah,
well, Spire's really, really exciting for me right now. It's a very small studio.
Yeah.
I think we're under 40 people. There's probably 20 something when I started. So I love having the feel of a short film, right? A very tightly knit group of people, but on a big production. Yeah. It's hard to do. You have to have great communication. You have to invite everybody into the room. You have to hear the notes and listen to ideas and not say no all the time. It's like, yes, and, is something that I love to hear. And I try to do that too. And people are presenting things. But yeah, I mean, I love what I do, I just want to keep doing it. There isn't like this grand design. It's like, let's just keep making great films and great stories.
Out of curiosity, you're 40 people at Spire. How many people were on the story team at Pixar when you were working there?
In the department?
Yeah.
Oh man, there was at least 50.
Yeah, just story people.
Yeah, I think there's more now.
That's crazy.
So
it must be like pretty exciting to work so closely with the people in other departments versus just kind of the story and the director. So you must be getting a ton of exposure to how the whole picture runs, I guess.
Yeah, we'll get there. We just started storyboarding 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. So,
oh, nice. Oh, wow.
Yeah. But on Incredibles 2, that's something we had to do because we were on such a short schedule. We had a year taken off of the movie. So, I was talking to people in layout and people, in effects and sets and, obviously the art department, production design, all that stuff all the way down the line, because people want to know what can we expect in the third act, because I have to prepare my team, so I would pitch the whole movie to the various departments. They would rotate in and out of the room,
Wow.
So they knew what was coming. And that was really important, because when you're doing screenings of these films, you're on a probably a 12-week schedule, at least for us. You can't wait that long to show the rest of the team the movie. So.
Yeah, wow. Cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you wanted to share or you're excited about right now, just as we're kind of wrapping up?
Well, this film
Final advice?
This film Trouble that we're working on is like really exciting to me. The press release is out there, so I can talk about it a little bit.
Tell me.
It's a high concept idea. What if trouble was a place? So, again, it's a relatability thing. Pretty much everybody has been in trouble. If they say they haven't, they're probably lying. Everybody gets into trouble at some point in their lives. So what happens if you get into trouble and you get whisked away and you go to a place called trouble? And what happens there? So that's the conceit of the movie.
Interesting.
Which was super exciting to me. When they pitched it, I'm like, I love it. The first assignment for me was, can you beat board the movie so we can use it as a pitch tool? And I'm like, absolutely.
Wow.
That sounds really fun. And I love.
You're doing this on your freelance time, right? Not in the last 3 weeks.
Yeah. And I love working with the team so much that, they said, hey, would you like to come on full time? And I said, yeah, this is great. I love this movie and you guys are great. And let's do that.
How many beats are in a beat board for a whole movie?
We started with 40 and we ended around 75.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then how long did that take you to make?
How long was that? Probably about 2 months.
Wow. Like full time, 2 months.
Yeah.
Incredible. And then, sorry, another question on this. When you're pitching the film to potential investors or people working on it, et cetera, and you're going through the beat boards as a movie, how fast do you go through those 75 beats? Is it like a full hour of explaining each shot, or is it like 10 minutes? Like this happens, like.
Yeah, it depends what the beat is. Some scenes are these load bearing scenes, where they have lots of information and exposition you got to get out. So you spend a little bit more time on those. Some go quicker.
So when you pitch the actual, like you use the finished beat boards as a pitch, you're actually just explaining the whole movie to somebody.
Yeah.
That's intense. What if
Brad Lewis has been, taking this pitch package around and pitching it.
Wow.
So he came back during that process and he said, I think we need a couple drawings for these 2 beats. We need to add this,
So you're pitching like broadcasters, I guess, and then they'll either buy or reject the whole movie at once. Like they already know the beginning to the end and the arcs and the characters and everything.
In certain cases, yeah. I mean, yes. Yeah, when you're pitching the whole thing to people, you know, you want to sell them on the idea of a movie.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I thought, when you pitch a movie, you've got like the synopsis and like an explanation of what goes on. You're not pitching the entire thing from start to
It
finish. That's
depends. It
crazy.
depends on how much you want, you
Yeah.
know.
Can I have 3 hours of your time, please? Like,
Well, you know, it's not, filmmaking is not a function of time, it's a function of engagement.
right.
So if you have a really compelling pitch and a great world and great characters and all this stuff, I mean, it could be 2 hours and people may be riveted to it.
Yeah.
You
Oh, I
know?
love that. I almost feel like you need to, the person pitching needs to be so charismatic and like know the story. And like, that's almost a skill in itself. Cause if you give me to pitch the movie, I might do a really poor job and it might not sell versus like, say, for instance, you go and pitch it and you worked on the boards, you might be amazing to sell it.
Yeah. Pitching is a whole like subset of being a story artist. That's really challenging. I was terrified of it when I first started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you're a pro.
You know, it depends on my conviction in the material.
Yeah.
You know, if
you're only working on things you love, like.
Well, if I board a scene and I don't feel 100% that with the ideas or the way I executed it, my pitch is not going to be as good. I'm going to be kind of BSing it a little bit, you know, to try to oversell it.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, you want to have that conviction in what you've done, that you can proudly stand up there and, you know, pitch the heck out of it for everybody in the room.
I love that. I even find, even if I'm proud of something, I find it hard to pitch anyways, because I'm very self-conscious about it. Do they like it? Is it going well? Because you're just looking at faces that are staring at you with like, sometimes they have no emotion. Sometimes they have too much emotion. Like,
yeah, absolutely. It's something that we teach, or that I used to teach when I was doing the internship. You know, we had a whole thing on pitching.
Oh, wow.
Because it's a skill, you know, and it has to be learned like anything else.
So what's the number one thing that you tell people who are learning to pitch? I mean, you kind of dropped some tips already, but is there like an overarching thing that you think people should know about pitching?
My number one thing is communicate with the audience. In other words, look them in the eyes, you know, because people will pitch and they'll have their back to the, you know, and they're going like this. And I'm like, no, you have to open yourself, open your body to your audience. And this is when we used to use a stick, but it's the same thing if you're sitting at a computer. You know, you got to turn and keep your body to the audience and engage them and look at them, because that helps them engage with you and what you're saying. But it also lets you know who's paying attention and who's maybe their eyes are wandering or they're looking at their phone or something. So I'm always looking right at the director when I'm pitching. So if they start to, you know, sag or, you know, then I'm like, I got to pick it up.
Yeah. Or
you know,
wrap
I
it
got to
up,
move it,
change it up or something. That's good. Cause that's good advice. Cause if you're not actively paying it, first of all, you have to know your pitch in and out to do that. And if you're not actively paying attention to what the audience is doing, you're going to miss, like, maybe if you skim over this part, they'll enjoy it more. Or maybe if you draw out this part more, it's going to be better for the pitch, et cetera. So that's really good advice.
If you have a spot in your sequence that you're pitching and you notice, you know, the energy's kind of going down in the room, it lets you know, okay, either my pitch is not on point or there's something wrong with this section.
Totally. Would you, if you notice something, well, I guess I was going to ask if you notice something's wrong or like the director is like, you know, they're falling asleep. Do you go back, change that area where they fell asleep in and then repitch it or work on it or something like that?
I don't know. I'd wait to hear the notes on it. You know, I mean, it's a pretty good indicator if, you know, do I have a pen here? If, you know, the director's there and they're just tapping the pen.
Yeah.
You know, there's sort of like this nervous energy, like get it going, you know, keep it moving. So for people who are advanced enough in their pitching skills, I always try to pitch in real time, like pitch the scene at speed. And it's hard to do because you got all this information coming out. You know, it's like what the characters are doing, what the camera's doing, all this stuff, the dialogue.
Well, you're taking them through the experience of watching the film, just by looking at an image and you telling them. I think that's great. That's interesting. I've never heard pitch it at speed before, but because usually I'm like, and then this happens, and then we go to the next one, and now he's jumping over this, and then, but.
Well, and that can certainly work. Sure.
Yeah.
You know, but you know, in story, when we're pitching or when we're putting the movies up on reels, I want the people who are watching the pitch or watching the film to feel like they are watching or experiencing the movie already at that
Yeah.
stage.
Nice.
You know, because that's going to put us that much further ahead, you know, early on in the process.
Nice. That's I've been like taking mental notes this whole time for myself. Cool. As we're wrapping up, is there anything else that you wanted to share?
I don't know, man. I just, you know, I could keep going. So it's
Well, I don't want to keep you forever.
no, it's all good, man. I love talking about this stuff. So, you know, yeah, I feel like if you're a story artist and you feel like you're getting pigeonholed with this kind of scenes that you get, don't be afraid to ask for other types of scenes. So, you know, that's something I would love to put out there. Also, I say this, you know, when I do talks and stuff, is find those people that have your back and that are going to push you and promote you and do all that. Like, find who those people are, because, you know, I was lucky I found mine early in my career, because they help you immensely along the way. And then when you get to a certain point in your career, someone's going to find you and you're going to be that person to them. So yeah, just keep challenging yourself. Get out of a comfort zone. It's super important.
Totally.
Yeah,
You dropped so many things, like study movies, just what you said. Like, you know, if you find yourself getting that same scene over and over again, get the confidence to ask for a different type of scene, even if, you know, you don't get it right away, but keep pushing yourself. And then find the people who have your back and, you know, use that to your advantage, and then give back when you're in that position as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're not in leadership yet, be a leader to the person, you know, to the left of you and to the right of you, you know, and start practicing that stuff.
I heard some good advice lately that made what you just said made me think of it. Was like, if you don't have that thing yet, just start acting like you already have it. And then, you know,
exactly.
I guess it's like fake it till you make it. Same difference.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Ted, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure to, you know, hear your journey, and I'm really excited about what you're doing now and can't wait to find out more about Trouble. And when I watch it, I'll be like, I know that guy. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. And if you're listening and you want to check out Ted's work or look him up, you can look him up on LinkedIn, and I'll include the link to that in the description of this podcast. And that's all for now. So thank you so much for listening. Well, goodbye. The music for this podcast was composed by Will Farmer and the graphics by Daniel Abensauer. I encourage you to look them up if you enjoyed their work.